So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today I'm joined by Pauly Vandenbergh, a proud Wirangu and Gugutha man from the South Australia's far west coast. Thanks for coming on, mate.
No worries at all. Good to be here. It's been a while. It's taken a while to get here.
So I'll give a bit of a background for you. It has been a while. I think we've been a couple of years now. I've been trying to.
I think so.
You avoided me for probably the first. No.
By chasing me.
And then our kids play at the same basketball club. You weren't going anywhere.
Yeah, I was locked in.
A bit of background, mate. So from playing professionally in the NBL with the Canberra Cannons to championing Indigenous empowerment through the Chindu Foundation, Munda Wines, and your role as AFL's National Indigenous and Multicultural Engagement Manager. You've dedicated your life to creating bridges between cultures and empowering future generations. You have a story of resilience, vision, and making lasting change, mate.
Who wrote that?
I did.
Well done.
It's pretty good, huh?
It's pretty good.
Just got it from your bio. Yeah. So I just want to kick off the podcast. I think you wrote something to me in your bio. We sent it through before the podcast around a third space. And you said you've dedicated your life to creating what is called a third space, a place where non-Indigenous Australians can fully embrace Aboriginal culture.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us what that means and what that means in your world?
Yeah, it's probably a big piece of my why in my life. Yeah, the third space was a concept that I had seen probably 20 years ago. And it just talked about, he had sort of a different analogy to it, but the way I reflected it from an Australian context was, I feel like for many Aboriginal people, we live in two worlds in Australia, you know, trying to understand the Western world and what comes with the Western worlds and the values and the beliefs that come in that part. And then there's this Aboriginal world where a lot of us are still really strong in our identity and culture, but there's still a big piece of information and history and heritage that still are missing in our lives.
Yeah. So
we constantly, I feel like as Aboriginal people, we bounce between the two worlds. And I think from a Western context or an Australian context, non-Indigenous people haven't spent much time in the Indigenous world, you know. And so when you sort of push the two worlds together, it creates this middle piece in the middle when the two worlds sort of overlap.
Yeah.
And I call that the third space.
It's a nice Venn diagram, isn't it?
Yeah, right. And when you visually see it, you can get an understanding. So when I deliver cultural awareness workshops or I'm helping organisations develop a reconciliation action plan, you know, that's all about how do you get more people into that third space where each of us have a better understanding of each other. We understand the values. We understand that we communicate differently, whether it's we don't like to make eye contact because we see that as a sign of respect.
Yep.
You know, there's all these things that I deliver in the workshop that just gets people into that space a bit, which we feel like if we get more people into that space, who knows, you might be able to have some powerful conversations about changing the date of Australia. Or maybe we might have had a positive result in the referendum last year, who knows, right? But I feel like the longer that people are unaware of our world, the longer we're going to take to actually come together as a country and provide a country that's safe and welcoming for all people.
So let's unpack that. What are you doing in that space to try to create that? I know personally that you're scoring runs left, right, and centre. But what are you doing, and how far off are we in Australia?
It's a good question. Like I guess last year when the referendum failed, it's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because I felt like the referendum wasn't that difficult, right? And maybe there were parts there that people weren't quite sure what they were voting for, right? So
I honestly think that's what it was.
Yeah, I get that.
I think that's a government error.
Yeah, there's a big challenge there in terms of being clear what we're voting for. But in life, in anything, if you want to know something, you go and delve.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? So
100%.
if for such an important decision on behalf of First Nations people could have delved and done their own research and actually saw that we're actually just asking, going forward, when it comes to Aboriginal affairs, that Aboriginal people make those decisions instead of non-Aboriginal people, which is always often the case. Like non-Aboriginal people get into those Minister for Indigenous Affairs roles and then they don't make the decisions that we think are right.
Yeah.
You know, so that was what the referendum. And so if you're sitting there, and I think I did a post on LinkedIn a few days after the result, which was, so let me get this right. If there's 100 people in a room, 70 people voted no. And I'm always in a room of at minimum of 100 people.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sit there then and stand up in front of an audience and go, oh, listen, I'm here to talk about my culture. But there's the other piece to me sitting in the back of my mind going, do you really care?
Yeah.
Right? And so that was a really tough period. Probably took me 6 months to really move past that and say, well, you know what, there are some positives here because there are 30% of Australia, so there's still 6.5 million people that did vote yes. There are allies. I know there are more allies, and maybe there were a lot of people that didn't vote as well, right? So there's some positive there in terms of how do we move forward with that, and then help to educate and and that's again, whether it's me delivering cultural awareness workshops or delivering raps at organisations, everything that I do in my life is all about coexisting. So if you think about my tuna business, right? My tuna business is, to become the first Indigenous person in the tuna business to own tuna quota. That was a really powerful moment for us as a family and a community, but it also starts to open up the minds of that industry about what sea rights look like for Aboriginal people, right? You think about the wine company, Munda Wines. Again, for a long time, everyone's just known the wine geographical indicators as McLaren Vale, Barossa, Clare Valley. But do you know that it was the Kaurna country, the Paramount Ngadjuri people before that? And that's the part where I'm saying I'm not taking anything away at McLaren Vale, I'm not taking anything away at Barossa. Love that, love the area. How do we coexist on the label?
Yeah.
So people just go, okay, so it is McLaren Vale. Oh, it is the Kaurna country as well.
Yeah.
Let's learn more about the Kaurna country. And I think that's what's resonating with people. It's not in your face. I'm not trying to be in your face. I'm saying, how do we coexist and do this country better,
And pay homage to what went before us, right?
That's right.
Going back to the referendum quickly, I remember at the time speaking to you and the position, the place you were in mentally from the result. I'm a firm believer, and you're 100% right. If you're about to vote on something that is important for Australia, this is the first referendum in however many years. This is obviously important for Australia. If you're about to vote on something, it is your duty as an Australian citizen to understand what you're about to vote on. And I could say, honestly, and the numbers of 70% seems about right again, that 70% of people I spoke to didn't make sense. I found myself explaining it to them. I went off and tried to understand it more. Completely understood, and I went, it's ludicrous if this doesn't get up. It's unfair, it's unjust. Then but my parents even, like, I had the conversation with them, and they're like, Dan, we don't know what we're
for sure.
And so then I said to my parents, well, this is it. And they go, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And I think that's the point, is that most people just couldn't make sense of what was going on. And I think there was a big blunder there from, we work in change. The company that I run, CGIQ, work in change. And all of our research has been centered around the art of sense making, which is very aligned to Indigenous Australian cultures, which is, we make sense of things through stories.
100%.
And so we just didn't do that.
No.
It wasn't done.
No.
It was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it was. But, we pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and we go again, and we just keep having these sorts of conversations,
So what of the Australia Day date then? What are I know you're pretty adamant that needs to be changed as well. Can you give us your perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I the way I've always described it is, I find in this country, people often don't put themselves in the feet or shoes of Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
And if another country were to come tomorrow, take over this land, took your kids away, paid you no money, took your wife away, took away the English language, made you dress a certain way, massacred all of us, and took our population from 4 million down to 400,000, and then said 235 years later, let's celebrate this as whatever country invaded us day. Would we honestly sit there and say, yeah, that's fantastic.
Sounds like a good idea.
That's bringing us all together.
Yeah.
Put it on the 27th of January. Put it on the 25th. But the 26th does not describe what Australia Day should be in my perspective.
Well, it doesn't describe a celebration, does it?
It's not a celebration, right? And that's what I'm saying. If the roles were reversed, there's no way anyone would sit there with their hand on their heart and say, yeah, no, that's that. No.
Yeah.
It should be Australia Day then. Right?
So Gabriella, our podcast manager, became an Australian citizen how long ago? 2 years ago.
Well done.
And so that date has a significance for her and all the other
sure.
people that have become citizens.
For sure.
How do we manage that ecosystem?
Well, it wouldn't matter what date that's on, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And if you think about the Australia Day tests, I hear there's very minimal questions on Aboriginal affairs, right? And that's part of my cultural awareness. I started everything off with a quiz about Aboriginal culture. That's to do with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, right?
Yeah.
And simple things like people don't know what the colours of the Aboriginal flag mean, or what the population of Aboriginal people are, or who was David Unipen, or who was Vincent Ngari. Like these sorts of questions that, well, when is Reconciliation Week and why is it celebrated on the 27th of May to the 3rd of June? Those two dates are really significant, but people don't know why, right? And so these really simple questions, no one knows. No one knows the answer because no one's probably, one, not been taught it in school, right? But the people that are coming into our country as well, they aren't even being explained or educated, right? And, you know, when you go from a population of 100% and we're down to 3.54%, you know, it's difficult when you're the minority in every situation in your life. At the basketball stadium, at the shopping centre, at the movies, you're always in the minority. And that's always been my life. My upbringing, I guess, leaving Sejuna was really challenging because big Aboriginal population, or your family, come to Adelaide, all of a sudden you're just by yourself. You know, and so I was really quiet, really silent about who I was as a person. And a lot of my teammates often tell me now, like, why didn't I say more back then? But when you're in the minority, brother, you just sit in the corner, you know, and you keep your mouth shut sort of thing, you know. So the last 15, 20 years of my life have been dedicating to get Aboriginal people to speak more, especially our young people, and just get people to get a better understanding of who we are. And that's why I love spending time with non-Indigenous people, because I feel like in our own country we're shut down a lot, but people coming into our country are more open and have a better appreciation and understanding of maybe what's happened in their countries and can relate, you know.
You said you've been doing this for 20 years. Do you get exhausted?
Oh, yeah, man. Exhausted, bro. It's, yeah, I hit a wall at night, yeah, often. And, you know, people don't see that part of me, and people don't see what Emma, my wife, and the kids see sometimes when you're just tired, bro. That's the word I use. I said, I'm tired of fighting constantly, you know, but I do get up the next morning and I go again, right? And I think it's really important, you know. There's so many in this space that are trying to do that, and yeah, I just I guess as I said, it is my why. So I do get the energy off it too. But yeah, it is tiring for sure.
If you were to achieve the vision of this third space, what does that look like from the eyes of the everyday Australian?
You know, like I had used this line a lot with our young Indigenous students. Is I'd love for them to just believe that anything is possible. And I don't think anything is possible in this country right now for them, for Indigenous young people.
Why is that?
Well, I think it's really challenging getting a job. I think poverty is a real big issue for our families. We still live in overcrowding conditions in our homes. You know, the average occupancy rate is 12 people per house, right? Even higher in regional remote communities. We still live a lot younger than non-Aboriginal people, so we've still got some real health issues, right? We're still locked up and incarcerated more than any other culture in the world. We're the most locked up people in the world.
As in jail.
Yeah. Right? You know, when you make up a population of 3 or 4%, but our prisons are 30% in the adult jails and over 50% in the juvenile, then yeah, there's an issue, right? There's a challenge there. Now, yes, there's a crime issue, one part, but when you start to delve deeper into the backgrounds and the living arrangements, and when you're living in the poverty line and you've got no food in the fridge and no food in the cupboards, and you've got 12 people in your house and your mum and dad can't find a job, right? All these things start to add up, right? And that's what, you know, that's why we keep talking about how do you break the cycle? What does breaking the cycle look like for your family? So establishing these different foundations that I have over time is all about being the first. That's the one thing we talk about. Be the first. If it's being the first to finish year 12, great. How about going on to university? Because the stats and the data tells us that any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander young person that finishes year 12 and goes on to university and gets a degree, then there is no gap. There's no gap. I can sit here across from you and say, I don't think there's a gap between you and I at all.
None.
But I've had to put the work in.
Yeah.
You know, I've had to change my lifestyle. I had to think differently about where I was in Sejuna coming to Adelaide. But I need to get everyone there. I need to get all our kids there to be strong in their culture and their identity, but also survive in this world, this other world, right? And that's all about coming into this third space. Still be strong in your culture, but how do you lean into non-Indigenous people like yourselves to understand, well, what do you need to do to survive in this world? You know, what do I need to how can you become a mentor for some of our kids to get them to understand what does work look like? What does business look like? How do you get a mortgage? What is mortgage? What is tax? Yeah. What is GST? What is budgeting? Because we've grown up in a different concept to that. Money is like this for us. We don't believe in the value of money. We don't own possessions, clothes. That's everyone. If your cousin comes along, and you could ask Shawnee or any of these AFL boys, your expectation is to give. So we do live a different concept, right? And that's really difficult when you start to say no to family, right? So there's a big piece from an Indigenous perspective that we want to help us survive in the world. But equally is how do we get more non-Indigenous people to understand that we have lived a different world and we have had a different upbringing. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there in regards to the prisons and the stats that you just discussed. Why do you believe that is the case? Is it the case of the Western world is just not blending with the Aboriginal world? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there's challenges. Like if I take the young person's life, I think that there are challenges with poverty, right? I think there's challenges in the home, and that's on us. It's not. I'm not saying it's all just a non-Indigenous issue. Unfortunately, I'm not, and this is difficult to say, but I'm only talking on behalf of my own family. It's sad when I go in and visit family in these situations, and I don't know, there's sometimes they feel there's comfort for some reason, right? Because when you're in a prison that's 30 to 40, 50% Aboriginal, you're with a lot of people that you're not normally. You're not the minority anymore, right? You got a bed, you got your own bed, you're getting fed, you get a Cert 1, Cert 2, Cert 3 while you're in prison, all that sort of stuff. And I've seen some family just, I guess, maybe it's institutionalized is a big part of it, and being there too long, and that's what they're used to. But there's this other piece where they feel comfortable, and I hate that part, right? I want that is what the report that Monsignor Capo did, 13 years ago, was breaking the cycle. Right? How do you stop the revolving door, right? Where our kids will come out, go into prison or go into the Cavan and come out and then straight back in again, right? And that's stop it. How do you stop that revolving door? And that's about finishing Year 12, going into university, getting a job, right? All the things that you and I do.
So education, you think, is paramount.
Yeah, 100%, right? And then, for a long time too, I will say that there was huge amounts of racism around the police force and the police treatment of Aboriginal people. And so, how do we bridge that gap? How do we bridge the relationship gap? And we're starting to see more Aboriginal police officers coming into the workforce, into the police force, and working up on the lands and having community constables. I think that's all really positive steps from a SAPOL point of view and breaking down those relationship barriers that have been in place for so long. But there's still a lot of heavy lifting in that space, for sure.
Yeah. This is going to be a tough question. But I guess for me, I'm asking it on behalf of the excuses that I hear from a lot of
go for it, man.
non-Indigenous Australians. There is a small minority that walk around the city intoxicated and whatnot. And then that just generally causes a shadow over that, over the group.
Yeah.
And then stereotypes are sort of born out of that. I know it's an absolute minority.
Yeah.
What can we do to address that situation?
Yeah, it's a good one because, given that I've created a wine company, it's one of the main ones that one of the main questions I get is, why would you create an alcoholic company given the impact that it's had on your community, right? And
because you guys talk about this in the Chindu Cultural Awareness, the impact of alcoholism.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And I'm not saying that we don't have a challenge with alcohol, 100%, right? And a lot of that's to do with diabetes, and the sugar intake has been our biggest challenge and our biggest killer of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today, right, is diabetes. And there's a lot of research around why that is, and the impact of sugar, and that we have smaller kidneys as Indigenous people as well, right? But what I will say about your point about seeing Aboriginal people, whether it's in the city or West Terrace or North South Terrace, whatever you want to do, I think the media have done a fantastic job to portray Aboriginal people in a bad light. That's all I've ever known, and that's all you'll ever see from the media is the challenges that we have with whether it's alcohol or domestic violence or any of that sort of stuff, right? And it's the way that we've been portrayed by the media, right? And yep, you can walk down here Rundle Street and you can see some Aboriginal people, but do you stop when you see a non-Aboriginal person and think the same about non-Aboriginal people? You don't. Do you think the same about the after party of Melbourne Cup? I mean, those guys are wild.
Yeah.
Right?
And they're lying on the ground. And
they're lying on the ground, they push police officers over, they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But we don't sit there and go, oh, you white people have got an alcohol problem, right? We don't say
Hindley
that.
Street on a Saturday night.
That's what Hindley Street on a Saturday night. How many of those are Aboriginal? Hardly any.
Yeah.
Right? No, I'm not saying we don't have those incidences there, but it's collective alcohol issues, right? But it's never been portrayed that way. And you can point the camera into Alice Springs and all that sort of stuff. But what about on the Gold Coast? What's happening? I don't see any Aboriginal kids on the Gold Coast running amok and breaking into houses at the moment, right? It's the way the media has created this narrative.
Even on the radio, you'll hear 2 youths of Aboriginal. Like, why do you need to go into race? When Like, I keep
100%.
It doesn't make sense. Just if it was 2 white kids, you wouldn't have said 2 Anglo-Saxon. Like, you just like, you're not. You know what?
100%.
Yeah.
And then the other piece to the alcohol too is there's actually a really beautiful side of Aboriginal people producing a natural alcohol beverage, right? Like Tasmania's got some amazing stories. Even the Ghana people around the Kwandong roots, right, used and adding yeast, and it's naturally fermenting into an alcoholic sort of, it's only 3%, but it was used for like ceremonial purposes, right? There's a beautiful story there about what Indigenous people in this country were doing way before the vineyards were planted. You know, and I often joke with the people that I work closely with when they talk about how old their vines are and all that sort of stuff. And I know I'll get straight in there and say, well, how old's the soil? Let's talk about the soil that you need, you know, and that's part of the motivation behind Munda Wines is to just to change a little bit of the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. So for context, you've got Munda Wines, which is how does that connect to your vision?
Yeah, it's to pay homage to the traditional owners, as we talked about earlier.
It's part of the education.
But you know, I think taking away everything else I'm motivated in that company to do. At the end of the day, I'd love nothing more for you and I to sit down with a glass of Munda around a fire and just have cool conversations and breaking down a lot of that stereotyping and
storytelling.
Storytelling, brother. I don't feel like we're a wine company. I feel like we're a storytelling company.
I love that.
Yeah, 100%.
Chindu, I can see everything that you guys are doing and how that absolutely connects to your third space.
Yeah.
So there's the cultural awareness piece, then there's the AFL role.
Yep.
Sorry, with Chindu, I mean, if we break that down, it's cultural awareness, Aboriginal AFL Academy, and the remote education programs.
Yeah.
So can you give us an overview on those 3 and how they're connecting into your vision?
Yeah, so, you know, I started those programs when I was at Port Adelaide. Always had this vision of creating programs that was going to empower Aboriginal people, and the cultural awareness piece became really critical on working with big corporates that had an interest in sort of Aboriginal young people and programs and communities, and so I feel like there was a nice tie in there by if we could educate these corporate Australia, get them to have cultural immersion experiences with these programs that we've just established. Then they'll start to break down a lot of those relationship barriers,
which is, to your point, the questions that you asked earlier.
Yeah.
I'm almost certain most people wouldn't know the answer.
They won't know it. I guarantee it.
So let's start with them. It was the Aboriginal flag.
Yeah.
What does the colours mean on the Aboriginal flag?
You want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Well, what the common mistake people say, so the red is the land, that's obvious, and the yellow is the sun, right?
Yeah.
The challenging one is the black.
People think it's the sky.
Yeah, people think it's the sky, right? And it actually represents the people, right? And when it was first flown in 1971 in Adelaide at Victoria Square, it was kind of the first symbol that really united us as a race, as Aboriginal people, right? And what people don't understand in our culture, yes, I'm Aboriginal, but if you actually delve a little bit deeper, I would say I'm actually Wirangu Gugutha.
Yep.
Right, and my community is, and Shawnee would be, well, yeah, Shawnee's Aboriginal, but if we delve a little bit deeper into Shawnee Burgoyne, he'd say, well, I'm Warai from Darwin and Gugutha.
Yeah.
Right, and so It's no different.
So I'll just cut in that we keep bringing up Shawnee because he's a mutual friend of ours. For those who are listening,
sorry.
Going, why do we keep bringing up Shawnee?
I think we were having a chat about, from a European context.
From Italians. Seriously, it's a way I would answer is people would ask, where are you from? And then I would say, well, where's your family from?
Yeah.
So I'm Australian, right?
Yeah.
But where's your family from? And it'd be Italy.
Yeah.
But they go, what part of Italy?
Yeah.
You say Calabria.
Yeah.
Okay, what part of Calabria?
Correct.
Sinopoli.
Correct.
Or Reggio di Calabria, Sinopoli. And so you just keep breaking it down
100%.
and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
We do the.
And then you have different attitudes with the North and the South, right?
Yeah. No one wants to speak to the North. And everyone thinks the South is the Bronx, which is where my family's from.
And I think every country can relate to that, right? You have your own internal challenges, right?
Yeah.
So, we're Aboriginal, but I represent Wirrangu Gulgava. I don't represent Ghana country or Nadjeri or Peramunk people. Like, that's important for them to have their own voice, right? And that's what the wine's trying to do as well. The wine is trying to amplify or elevate them, to give them a platform, because they've been missing and invisible in that wine industry, But yet, a lot of the words from those wine labels and companies come from our language.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece to the cultural awareness is one, you're trying to get people to come to that third space. And what does that look like? Is it a treaty? Is it changing the Australia flag? Changing the Australia Day, right? When you get off, let me ask you this question, right? What comes to mind when you think of New Zealand? When from a cultural point of view, what springs to mind?
The Maori people.
Yeah, Maori. What else?
The Kiwi.
Yeah. Them as a whole country. Yeah. So Maori.
Or the Haka.
Yeah. That springs to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so if we're overseas, if we're in another country somewhere and we're having a chat with someone and coffee and let's talk about Australia, what would we say comes to mind when you think about Australia? Like, what are we about? What do we think?
As in, how do we explain Australia?
Yeah, if people are saying, what is Australia? We would say what? Some of the things that we're about. Like, what's part of our...
Beer drinking. Sport. Kangaroos and koalas.
Yeah.
the Sydney Harbour Bridge or...
100%.
The weather, beautiful weather. Yeah.
Right? And there's the difference, brother. Because the way that New Zealand have been able to...
Oh, they're amazing the way they've done it.
Right? So the first thing that comes to your mind is Maori, the Haka, right? Not often it's the All Blacks as well. Are in there, right? But for some reason or other, brother, when we talk about Australia, 65,000 years of culture doesn't come up. Indigenous people don't come up. It's not front of mind. You don't talk about Aboriginal people. You don't talk about the 40,000 years of rock art that's all around Australia. We don't talk anything about Aboriginal people when we think about Australia. And that's why I get up out of bed every day, because one day, I don't care, I'm not saying sports isn't important and beaches and beautiful weather, 100% that's part of us. I just want us to get a mention. That's my why, is how do Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people get a mention about we are part of this country? And I think that's part of our upbringing and our education, right? You haven't been taught stuff about our culture, right? You haven't been taught about the Aboriginal flag. You haven't been taught about Vincent Lingiari or who David Unipen is, or you don't know about the population sizes. You don't know how many language groups we've got in this country, because you're not taught it, right? That's not your fault. You're just not taught that part in education, or you don't get to spend much time with Aboriginal people. But that's where we have to get to. One day, sports, fun, larrikin, beaches, 65,000 years of culture. We've got the oldest surviving culture in the world. Why aren't we proud of that?
Such a shame, isn't it?
Such a shame. It's a missed opportunity.
I've say that quite a bit, in the sense that when I talk about New Zealand, I'm like, the way that they've embraced, the Haka is just absolutely front and center of their culture. And to me, it's one of the most inspirational things. Like, I sit on YouTube and watch video after video of the Haka. And I remember there was one against Australia where it was the Haka versus the Indigenous Aboriginal Australians. And it was the most amazing.
It's pretty cool.
And but then I wonder, like, why aren't we doing more of that?
Yeah.
Because, like, I was so proud to be an Australian in that moment. Yeah.
Well, you think about some past histories, bro, right? Kathy Freeman, right? 2 years before the 2000 Olympics, she wins a gold medal in the Commonwealth Games, and she brings out the Aboriginal flag, and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Right? You think about moments in our time, right? Like, you think about, you just mentioned the Haka, and how inspiring it can be, right? Then we go back 10 years ago, where Adam Goodes kicks a goal during Indigenous round, and he does a dance towards the Carlton fence. I don't even know if he actually knew it was the Carlton fans, and all hell breaks loose, right? We've always constantly been told to sit in the corner, bro. We've never been encouraged to display our culture, right? And it starts there with Adam Goodes. Or even recently, the Wallabies tried to add some Indigenous words into the Australian anthem. All hell breaks loose. The inclusion part here is just missing completely when it comes to Aboriginal people, right? Because we're always being told, stay in your lane, sit in the corner.
How did New Zealand get it so right and we're getting it so wrong?
I mean, maybe the Treaty of Waitangi had something to do with it. Now they're having some challenges right now with that, but maybe that had something to do with it. You know, there's only a few languages there, so it might have been easier to teach language. I think they still make up fair percentage of the population. I think that has a big part of it as well. But you think about getting off a plane in Auckland, what that looks like and what that experience looks like. You're almost instantly immersed in multiculture, right? And you might have dancers there. What do we get off in Adelaide? What do you see in Adelaide Airport? Nothing. And that's the front. That's front, right? That's the first thing you get off in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, any of those airports. Where's our culture? How do people know that Aboriginal people actually exist here in this country, right? And that's my bro. That's my why, man. Like I want to have words around this country, like on bus stops. Look at bus stops even. You know, we can have Mandarin, we can have French, we can have all these other languages on our own bus stops in Adelaide. Why can't we have Ghana? Why can't we work with the Ghana people and have Ghana languages up? I'm not saying remove everyone else. Why can't we be there too? So people can maybe start to learn our language. Now, what I will say, I reckon that's our generation, our experiences, right? What I will say, if I took those questions home to primary school kids and high school kids right now, they'll probably get those questions right. I feel like schools today are doing better.
It's starting to.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? But our generation, we missed it. You missed it.
Oh, and the generation before.
Yeah, 100%.
Australia's kidding themselves if they don't think they're racist. Like it's
correct.
It's an absolute.
Yeah. Correct.
And
go on.
And you know what's infuriating about that is typically the cultures that were the ones that were treated poorly that are now doing the same back to others.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to sit here and try to protect the Italian community. The Italian community is as racist as they come, right? They just are.
Yeah.
And the European communities. But they seem to forget, like when my mum came here, she was 4 years old when she moved to Australia. And she was bullied and beaten and spat on and told she got stunk and her food was different and like she went through torture.
100%.
Now, she's a bit different. She's actually a little bit more humanistic and appreciates the human.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, there's people that I know in that community who are one-eyed. Yeah. And it's horrible. Which is kind of why I've almost removed myself from it and gone, I'm here to treat the individual.
Yeah. And honestly, bro, we are so, what's the word? We are so respectful of other people's culture. We actually embrace it. We actually...
Well, because you believe in it.
100%. We wouldn't go to Italy.
And shit on their culture.
Mate. What's the most famous thing? We wouldn't go to Colosseum, right? We wouldn't go to the Colosseum and just start climbing all over it, right? We wouldn't go scratching our names into it. I guarantee we would not do that sort of stuff. We wouldn't go to the Vatican, start climbing all over it. We wouldn't go to anything significant, the Eiffel Tower and start.
No, you respect it.
We respect it, man. We respect everyone's culture. We are so nice. And I think that's the problem too. I think we are a really nice culture, sometimes too nice.
You get taken advantage of.
100%. We get mistaken. It's a weakness, right? That people see that as a weakness because we are too nice. I feel like sometimes we actually should just protest properly. Not taking lives.
But that would just feed into the narrative, though, wouldn't it? If you went with.
That's what I'm talking about. How long can you be nice for without change, right? That's the part. Like, where do you draw the line in the sand? But anyway, I'm just saying.
Oh no, this is a complex.
Yeah, for sure.
But you're right. I think I've never thought about it from the perspective of, from a tourism point of view, actually. I've never thought about it like that. And as you've just quite rightly said with New Zealand versus Australia, it's such a shame.
Yeah, it is. It's a missed opportunity, bro.
Then why why are there people out there thinking that all this acknowledgement and welcome to country is just
Yeah.
virtue signalling and all the above? Like,
See, I think we've gone too far with the acknowledgement of country. I think we do it too often. I believe we should pull back a little bit and just do it at really significant events.
Yeah.
So I think someone's gone over time and done it too often,
Yeah.
and maybe that's skewed the importance of just doing an acknowledgement.
yeah,
But how long does the acknowledgement take? 30 seconds? I know some people take a long, long time.
Yeah.
If you're just doing an acknowledgement, but yeah, and I think that's why people now almost screw their face up a little bit, because it's become a little bit too political.
yeah,
You know, and it was always set out to welcome people
yeah,
and get them to understand that there's been people here for 65,000 years.
Yeah.
You know, that was the intent of it, right? And that was
Yeah.
what past practices used to do around, you know, you just wouldn't go walking into another person's country, right? Like in Europe, you just
Yeah.
wouldn't go crossing the border and just set up shop.
yeah.
There's a process of welcoming and stuff like that, right? So, yeah, I agree though. I think we've gone too far in terms of where we do and how often we do acknowledgements.
Yeah.
And maybe we should just bring it back a little bit.
I guess for me, the obviously being friends with yourself and just general respect to the people in the past and the history gone by, I acknowledge just by merely being here that I'm part of
Yeah,
this community, of this land, of like
yeah.
to keep saying it is almost like, why do I have to keep saying it?
Yeah,
Like,
for
why do I
sure.
have to keep trying to just drum it in? I acknowledge it. I know.
Yeah.
But yet I'm a rarity, and I think I've heard the counter argument is no. We actually, the more we do it, the more people will become aware. But then the more we do it, the more people get pissed off.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
like there's this fine. I think
Yeah.
you're right. There's a fine line.
Yeah, and we got to. I don't think that's always a moment to become political right then. I always thought that the welcomes should be more about how to, educating and embracing. That's it.
Yeah, there's a couple of people that I don't know their names, but they do welcomes here in South Australia at the big events, and it's an education.
Yeah. Sometimes
Mickey-
it's funny.
So yeah, or Mickey O'Brien
Yeah,
is
yeah.
one of them. He's the best,
Yeah.
and because he's there to educate. I'm not here just to do a tokenistic thing. I'm
that's
here to
right.
educate. That's what it should
That's
be about.
what it should be about. 100%, bro.
And doing your culture, going back to your cultural awareness sessions. I've done it twice.
Yeah.
I remember I did it when you were at Port Adelaide, and then I organised it we organised it for our team here at Synergy IQ as well. And at the time, it was Wade and Rigby.
Yeah.
And I honestly believe it's something that every organisation should
Yeah.
do, because it just opens your eyes to perspectives.
Yeah.
And again, going back into the change space, I know that your why is to make change. Your ultimate why is to make change, and obviously with Synergy IQ, that's what we do. Is we help facilitate change.
Yeah.
Perspectives are one of the most important things in part of change. It's to understand the shoes and the mental models of those who are walking beside you.
Yeah. I always talk about empathy too, bro. That word for me is like, where's the empathy? Where's the love?
Yeah.
There's no love, man. And that's...
Why do you think there is a lack of empathy?
I think there's a big piece there that people don't want to acknowledge our past history.
But why not? Like,
Does Australia really want to identify the 550 massacre sites in Australia? Right? Like we could sit there, if I asked any person off the street, what's the biggest massacre site in Australia? They'll say Port Arthur.
yeah, it's
Right.
in Tasmania.
Tasmania, right? And horrific. Like not taking anything away from that.
Because what was that, 300,
No, that was 30-something.
30-something?
Yeah. But it's not even close, brother, to the massacres that my people...
No, the cliff. I'm talking about the...
Oh, you're talking about Elliston, right?
Elliston,
Waterloo,
yeah.
yeah. So that was 150.
150
Yeah,
people.
that was
Yeah,
150
that's
people. Yeah.
pushed off.
I'm just talking about from a non-Indigenous
Oh, the
perspective.
Port Arthur,
Australian,
Port Arthur was 30. No,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Elliston
Yeah,
one.
yeah, the Elliston one, right? So that's 150, and they've got monuments there, and the council acknowledged what happened there now, and I felt like that was a real big moment for the council and us as a community and as a family, because that was a big part of truth telling. Truth telling was a big part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which was, and maybe that was the order. Maybe we got the order wrong, whether it was referendum, treaty, truth telling. Maybe we got the order wrong, but the truth telling part was all about that past history. Like, we're really good at acknowledging the World War I's and the World War II's in Vietnam, and we celebrate Anzac Day, and we have a minute's silence for Remembrance Day on November 11th. all good, and I'm not taking anything, love it. But we don't want to acknowledge the frontier wars, the wars that a lot of our people put up, right? We've got a national war memorial. People can go there and be educated consistently. Imagine if we put up a war memorial of Indigenous people. How would that go down in Australia? I bet you that'll get shut down, right? Or can we coexist in there? In that national war memorial, could Aboriginal people, and that's what Rachel Perkins did a documentary around the frontier wars, right? The first wars in Australia. She was challenging, not challenging, but putting it right to the National War Memorial, saying, well, we've got all these wars here, but we've also got these other wars that all of our people had put up with and experienced. Can we put them up as acknowledging who are our warriors and who are our fallen soldiers and stuff, you know? But I guess that's the history part that just gets pushed under the rug, right? Swept under the rug, and people don't want to know about that part, right? People don't want to know about the deaths in custody, that 14 Aboriginal people die per year in custody. You know, people don't want to know that.
People don't want a mirror held up to them.
No, absolutely not, right?
What do you say to the people who, you know, when we talk about, you know, when Kevin Rudd came out and said sorry and all that, so what are we sorry for? I didn't do anything wrong. Like, what's the response to that?
What if your child killed someone?
Yeah.
Would you go to that parent and say, look, I'm so sorry, man, right? It's not you taking responsibility that you did it. It's just apologising to make other people feel better. And that apology was to make Aboriginal people feel better, somewhat feel better.
Well, it's a level of empathy, isn't it,
It's
right?
an empathy thing, right? This is what we're talking about, right? It's not putting blame on people. We're not, as Aboriginal people now, coming back and suing the government because Kevin's finally, or the government have finally acknowledged that the past policies around removal, the forceful removal of Aboriginal kids was in place. It's acknowledging that that policy really destroyed our culture and our identity. It took away our language, it took away the way we dress, it took away everything. It brought us under the White Australia policy, which we had to get permission to enter into shops and work and everything else that comes with it, right? We couldn't associate with fellow Indigenous people, all that stuff, right?
I remember in your cultural awareness session, you had the ID of an Aboriginal man who was classified as fauna.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, he came under the Aboriginals Protection Act, right, which was the part of that White Australia policy, right? And you know, Aboriginal people used to call them dog tags, right? And it was just describes what they can and can't do, right? And what was prohibited and all that sort of stuff, right? And that, you know, people don't understand too, that policy, and there's no real evidence, bro, like that Aboriginal people came under the Flora and Fauna Act, right?
Okay.
But if Aboriginal people, up until 1967 when the referendum was on, that included Aboriginal people into the Australian population for the first time. So 1967, not 1867, this is 1967, Aboriginal people were first...
Just 50 years ago.
Were first included in the Australian population. So I guess the narrative around the Flora and Fauna Act was because, well, if we weren't part of the Australian population and seen as human beings and people, where did we fit?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And the way I look at 67, so that's when they got rid of the dog tags or the White Australia policy or the Aboriginal Protection Act. But the way I see that is, so you're telling me in 1967 when my mother was 19 years of age, she was what then? What are you telling me? What was my mum for the first 19 years of her life? Was she a plant? Was she an animal? Where? Tell me. And so when people start to understand, well, shit, that makes sense. I can see why there's a challenge in Aboriginal people's lives, right? When you're not human until 50 years ago, right? And then you're playing catch up, brother, from 67, right? Then all of a sudden you got this huge influx of this past policy that removed our kids. You think about the trauma that would go through any one of us if our kids got removed today.
Yeah.
Just because your kid might be a lighter skin colour or a darker skin colour or you look different or the government just thought, Daniel, you know what? We don't like the way you parent. We want to change that. We're going to take your kids. No question, just forceful removal, right? You think about trauma that comes into that, right? So then all of a sudden you get to the 80s once that policy finishes. So now we're in the 1980s. Now we're 40 years away for today. So you're telling me in the last 40 years, we're meant to be able to understand how to get through year 12, understand university, getting a job, and then getting home ownership, getting a loan, brother, is one of our biggest challenges.
Move into the Western ways.
In the last 40 years, and then people go, they're always complaining. Why did we say sorry? I didn't do that. Mate, you've been benefited from those past policies that have allowed you to create generational wealth. on our country. We have not had that luxury. Not at all. We're starting now to try and play catch up, right? And all the things that we've been fighting for, whether it's land rights, a treaty, a referendum about a voice to parliament, right? Changing the date, all these, they don't even have an impact in your life. You still get to come to work. You still get to live in your house. You still have your kids.
And yet there's people who are just so adamant about it not changing. But it means nothing to them.
It means nothing to their life at all. We don't talk about having your kids removed. We don't talk about you losing your job. None of that. That's not language we use as Aboriginal people.
And there's studies now to show that trauma is actually transferred genetically.
My mother was born at the mission that my grandparents were removed to. You can't tell me that doesn't flow on, right? Now, we had different attitudes in our family, but you could see what trauma and the impact trauma can have. It's 100% generational. Man, I'm getting on a roll.
It's heavy. But it's like, this is the power of this podcast is that we can reach a medium, right?
Yeah.
And I guess for me, it's, well, what next? Like, what can I do? Like, I don't need this. I'm not sitting here saying that I want to help jump and change on, but how do I support? So if you talk about empathy, there's a famous researcher slash public speaker in the world. Her name's Brene Brown. I'm not sure if you ever heard of her. Her TED Talk is one of the most downloaded talks of all time and whatnot. She talks about shame. She talks about empathy. And the way she explains empathy is she's saying empathy, think of like being someone being in a hole, right? Like in a little cave. There's a hole at the top of it and they're in this cave. And sympathy is sticking your head in the hole in the person that's in the cave and going, hey, you all good?
Yeah.
Whereas empathy is getting in the hole with them. It's getting down, sitting there with them and just being by their side.
Like that analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, how do I sit in the hole with you? How do I just be present as a non-Indigenous person? What's my role that can help this third space that you're and change that you're after?
Yeah. Well, it's to your point, right? You've personally gone out and got yourself educated, right? So you've sat through 2 cultural awareness workshops, right? So there's one part. 2, you spend time with both me and other people, other Aboriginal people. So you get to have conversations about that. And I think the people that you hang out with, we're all open to any questions, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other part too, right? Having a relationship with someone. And then the last step I always talk about is how do you get out of the office space or the classroom and have more cultural immersion experiences, right? And that's that's that piece around when people come off the planes, what does the cultural immersion experience look like for them, right? So the cultural immersion experience, I think that's where you start to see real change about just understanding the part of Aboriginal people, right? And then just being open. And if you think about the cultural awareness workshops where we talk about the different communication styles, right?
Yep.
Whether it's not making eye contact, not a big handshake.
Yeah, well, that was a big one for me. The eye contact.
Yeah. We just don't make eye contact, right? And a big piece of it.
But you and I are making eye contact right now.
That's fine.
In conversation?
Well, it's because I've taught myself.
Yeah.
But if 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't have.
Okay.
Right? And that's the piece I work with a lot of young people about is making eye contact because in the Western world,
it's seen as respect.
Yeah, well, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, if you're not focused.
If you're not focused and you're not making eye contact,
it can make you look guilty.
All that stuff, right? And that's what comes with it. And you think about an Aboriginal kid too, right? Like this is I describe this a lot in my sessions, right? Is we're a pretty quiet, silent culture as people in general, right? I might be a little bit loud every now and then, but that's me. But growing up, I was pretty quiet. Didn't make eye contact, right? Didn't stick my hand up in classrooms, right? So we also have a real issue in our families and communities with hearing loss.
Yeah.
Right, so we've got a real challenge with that. So I had hearing loss growing up. I had 6 operations around grommets and had my adenoids removed and tonsils removed. And then our youngest daughter, as you know, has got 50% hearing loss, right? So this is an issue still today, right? So if you think about an Aboriginal young kid who's, 6, 7, 8, hearing loss, not making eye contact, silent. It's got a real shame factor, like there's shame to do stuff, right? You're almost behind the eight ball straight away in the Western world. Survival in the Aboriginal world, no worries. Bringing them into a classroom setting, it really does create a real challenge for our kids to really start to get through, right? So, yeah, I mean, back to your question about
It's
what's
awareness,
next.
isn't it?
Yeah, man, it's awareness, brother. It's the education piece, 100%. You know, like the narrative coming up, you know, leading up to the referendum where Aboriginal people get free houses, free cars, you know, AB studies is exactly the same as Oz study. They just called it different. If you want to check my bank account, I will show you that there's a big fat mortgage sitting there, right? And a car loan, right? So we don't get free houses, we don't get free cars. AB study is exactly the same, right? Like, but the narrative changes, right?
Well, the narrative is that you get less interest rates and stuff like that.
You think Westpac Bank are going to give me a less interest rate?
That's what I don't. But that's a narrative that's been fed to me since I was a kid.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah. Now we've got Indigenous Business Australia that help Indigenous people get loans.
Yeah.
They might have a smaller deposit amount than your traditional banks, but the interest rate's higher.
Yeah.
So yeah, we might have a smaller deposit, but you're paying more than in the big banks, right? So it's all false narrative.
Why is this false narrative still around though?
Racism, bro.
People want to believe it.
Yeah, man. Well, people choose not to believe the truth.
Then are we doomed to never getting this changed if we just keep sticking? I mean, obviously, with the education of the kids now, it's different. Do we just sit and wait? Like what? How? Like what?
Yeah. If you got the answer, brother.
I don't know. I know. But I know, and the thing is, it's like I was thinking back to the rock drawings, and I'm like sitting here thinking to myself, how come I've never gone and witnessed I've never gone and visited somewhere, because I'm so interested in.
Yeah.
And I'm almost kicking myself going, fuck, there's part of Australian history that I've not.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
We'll make it happen, for sure. People need to experience that sort of style of, and people need to see the beautiful side of our culture.
Well, correct. For me, this happened centuries ago, if not longer.
There's 40,000-year-old rock arts, bro.
And I'm just thinking, you're just sitting in a historical time box, aren't you, really, when you're there? And just going 40,000 years
Paint
ago.
doesn't even last on houses for 40 years.
I know.
We've got rock art sitting there for 40,000 years old. And we talk about the sophistication that did come with our culture, bro. People don't want to acknowledge how we farm differently, you know, and how we read the seasons and all that stuff, right? How we use different ochre for different parts of our culture, right? So yeah, bro, it's this cultural immersion experience that I want everyone to be involved in.
How do you scale what you're doing?
Oh man, that's the challenge.
TV show next?
A podcast.
Well, you started your podcast.
I did. Yeah, that. But you're having fun with it.
You're just too busy.
Too busy. Yeah.
But in realistic terms, like the Chindu cultural awareness session, obviously it's more centered around South Australia from a Ghana people and whatnot. But how do we take that and get that in organisations? Because I think that's where
it starts.
That's where you can take it into big business. Yeah. Big business have the cash to fund.
Yeah.
And put their people through it.
Yeah.
And they're typically educated people, and therefore we can make the word spread.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a South Australian focus with Jindu or the Aboriginal Basketball Academy, but there are unreal organisations nationally doing similar work.
Doing the same stuff?
Yeah, doing the same stuff.
Yeah, great.
It's starting to have slow impact. We just have to remain hopeful, brother. That's the word we use all the time. We've got to remain positive and hopeful that one day when our kids or grandkids are at our age, everyone's just feeling inclusive of each other, you know?
So where does your role in the AFL fit all into this?
Yeah, it's sort of changed this year. So I used to be the National Diversity Talent Manager, trying to find, unearth Indigenous and multicultural athletes for the AFL and AFLW. And then, we started to get feedback from the Indigenous players and the multicultural players, especially the Sudanese players, there was a bit of a disconnect with head office. And given that I had such a good relationship with all the players, they thought that role might be better for me just to try and improve those relationships with headquarters. And so, I moved into the Indigenous Multicultural Engagement Manager role and just loved it. Just loved spending time with the athletes and, even the Indigenous staff at each of the clubs, We've got some past players that are in those Indigenous player development roles, which is a connector for the clubs. But I'm there as the connector for the head office and what we're trying to do at head office. And, we've got some players, obviously Chatty Wingard retired this year, but he was one of those real vocal leaders that really wanted to understand why we got such low Indigenous athletes coming through at the moment. Why aren't we getting more Indigenous athletes drafted? And so this is probably my goal from an AFL perspective, is trying to work with a lot of the leagues, SANFL, WAFL, and the AFL, obviously, about what does the pathway look like for an Indigenous kid when they're under 16s, under 18s, and then getting drafted. So, yeah, it's a big role, but I love that sort of challenge.
How do you fit in all this?
Yeah, I know it's a bit crazy, but I don't know, brother. There's something weird about me. I just love it.
You don't stop.
Yeah, I just don't stop, bro. I really enjoy my life.
Because I know you're a big family man, and what throws me is that you are a serial entrepreneur in the sense that you've got Munda, the tuna, the Chindu, and the basketball academy, and everything else that goes with it. Then you are practically full time at AFL. Then you decide, you know what, I'm going to go and coach down at the basketball club. And do you? I know you're a big family man. Do you spend much time with your family?
Yeah, I know, right? Well, I only coached my daughter.
Yeah,
so that was about me
being
with my daughter.
Last year, you didn't.
Last year.
Oh no, yeah,
you
last
did.
Year did.
Yeah. So that was about me. Just being able to then have a connection, because she loves basketball just as much as I do, and
she's a gun.
Yeah, and she's a good girl. So I think that was a really special moment for me and her for the last 2 seasons.
You're coaching Harlow now, though?
Yeah, so I'm trying to. Not sure, but I'm trying to get out of that one. But under 10s girls is an interesting coaching experience. But yeah, and I think coaching for me actually takes me away from everything that we talk about. I don't think about.
You're back in because for those who might not know, you played NBL, Canberra Cannons.
Yeah.
So basketball is your life.
Yeah.
Sport is your life. Is that why you've developed these programs?
Yeah, because I just know the power of sport, brother.
Yeah.
Like sport, I think from an Australian context, and particularly like AFL, the AFL has really been a barrier breaker in terms of all the Indigenous athletes that were coming through. And, you think about Nicky Winmar and Michael Long and Gavin Wanganeen and all these, special people that came through. And, Sir Doug Nichols before that, and, Maurice Rioli. You got all these people that had a real impact on the field, and people actually was probably the first time people were barracking for them. Probably the first time they felt like, hey, non-Indigenous people are actually clapping for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been the power of sport. It takes away your skin colour. It talks about, hey, I'm going to barrack for that black, white and teal
It didn't
colour.
for Adam Goods, though.
It didn't. Well, many of us in the AFL industry did, and I would still say there was more people that supported him than they didn't.
Yeah.
It's just that the minority caused a big ruckus.
Yeah.
And that was the challenge for Adam. And, unfortunately, when you think about the crowd's behaviour back then, it's quite sad to see that that's how an Indigenous person would be treated when you're standing up for something that's right.
I agree.
So
for me, sport has always been, my background's in sport. So for me, it just set, I believe that I am where I am today because of the discipline that I had in my sporting career growing up, the ability to work together as a team, set goals, work hard. And I kind of instill this on my girls in their basketball today is if you're not rocking up to training or you're not putting in 100% effort every single time, then you're effectively letting your peers down as well. You're letting not only yourself down, but you're letting the team down. If you're missing training, then you're missing the opportunity to learn something and learn a new play. Coach has got to come back next time and reteach it. So all these different things. And I think for me, it's about showing up.
Yeah.
And showing up and being part of something. It's bringing back community, purpose in your life. It gives you something to work to.
Yeah.
And I can see that's what you're doing with the Aboriginal basketball community, the AFL Academy that you've got going. Is that
100%.
The sole purpose?
Yeah, man. Everything you said.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's amazing what sports do for you when you're in that space, right? It even talks a lot about time management.
Yeah.
I think it's a big part of being an athlete is how you manage your time and
Yep.
everything that goes with that, So, I've used it for creating those sorts of I guess, internal pillars for yourself and what you need to live by to become to even get to the elite.
Yeah.
It's tough to be an elite professional athlete, but if you get there, you've done some serious stuff.
Yeah. You put in the hours.
You've put in the hours,
Words of Kobe Bryant, Mamba mentality, right?
Mamba mentality.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, I always liked Kevin Durant's quote, which was, hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard, right?
Yeah.
Like that just speaks volumes.
Yeah.
Like you can be talented as all hell, and we've seen them, athletes over time.
Yep.
They just don't want to put in the work.
Yep. And they get left
the
behind.
The work is the part, So, yeah, it's probably why I liked coaching. I wanted to see if I could make, at that time, my daughter and her teammates work. And what does work? And, and we started to close the gap on those top teams, and we started to really start to bridge that gap a little bit because they started to put in the work.
Yep.
And then I quit.
Dealing with 10 under 16 girls.
Oh, man.
Is a tough gig for anyone. That'd be harder than your jobs are.
Your daughter too, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's that dynamic you got to play out. It sounds to me, and I want to bring this back to sort of the corporate world because we do have a corporate audience. The change that you're trying to make starts with education.
Yeah.
In everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Whether it's teaching kids from a sporting perspective, going out to remote communities and educating them, working with cultural awareness, working with organisations with your cultural awareness sessions.
Yeah.
Munda wines with, again, understanding from an educational point of view where the actual, like you said, with the soil, the earth in which the grapes are grown.
Yeah.
The storytelling
Yeah.
that can be said around a campfire or even at the kitchen table having a few wines with friends. The tuna farm, again, from the same perspective of what does this mean from an ocean, Aboriginal sea country. So I never even thought of all this. And it keeps coming back to education. And I'm drawn to believe that what we're working on here at Synergy IQ in that sense-making piece is exactly what you're doing with the community, South Australian community, is that you're trying to help people make sense of what's gone by and how can we connect it.
Yeah. And coexist.
That's
it, man. I hope so. I hope that's the path I'm on. That's that's always been the challenge for me is I don't switch off. So Emma gets pretty frustrated at night if I'm sitting on the lounge and I'm silent because she knows I'm thinking about something else.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I'm wired. It shouldn't make sense that a little Aboriginal boy at the time from Sejuna goes on and plays in the NBL.
Why?
Because it just doesn't happen, brother. Like I'm the first to do it. Right? So there's no role modelling effect in my life. There was no role model in my family that went, hey, I can go from Sejuna to Adelaide to the Canberra Cannons.
So how did you break the mold?
It's that wiring, bro. I'm wired different. I'm wired to think that anything is possible and that there is no gap between me and a non-Aboriginal person. Because I kept thinking about that whole gap when it first came to light around the government talking about, how do you close this gap? I refuse to believe that I have a gap.
I want to just pick on that for a moment because this mindset thing I think is really important. Call this white privilege if you want, but I never stepped on a footy field thinking that worrying about a gap. Like I just played.
That's right. No, I wanted to be the best.
But
that's proving myself that Aboriginal people deserve to be on that court.
And it just when you talk about there's a YouTube clip. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's probably one of the and I think we should link it in this podcast notes. Is that there's a footy coach, an NFL football coach in America, and he's got the students lined up on.
Yeah.
Have you seen this one?
Yeah. Take one step.
Never
had to worry about food. And
Take another step if you've got lunch every day. Take another step if you've got two parents.
Yeah.
Take another step, and you just see this line of the African American kids
just standing there.
And he's asked 10 questions, and like the non-African American kids have all stepped forward. Some have stopped in a few spots, but for the most part, most of them stepped forward in 10. And the idea was that it was a 100-meter race, and that these 10 steps they'd taken forward, that the non-African American kids were probably 80 meters in.
Yeah.
And then he goes, right, everyone on your marks, get set, go. Whoever gets over the line first gets the $100 from me.
Yeah.
And it just points out how unfair the head start is.
Yeah.
Now, That's not to take away anything from the people and the
No.
success that at the front, but it just goes to show the starting point of where.
100%.
And I guess that's what you're really trying to show.
Yeah. I grew up in a single Aboriginal mother's house. You know, she had all kinds of challenges.
Where was your father?
Off.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many brothers and kids?
I've got another older brother.
Older brother.
Yeah, he had his challenges as well.
Yeah.
But so it was just myself and mum.
Yeah.
You know, and like I said, you know, when you're isolated and your mum's, not that I thought that anything was wrong with my life. Mum created an unbelievable life for me. But when you reflect later on in life, you go, far out, that must have been challenging. You know? And so, yeah, I don't know where the mindset came of. Now, might not have been the best on the court, but in my mind, I was.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't the best.
Well, that's all that matters.
That's what I'm saying, right? And that, you know, as you know, confidence in sporting field or court goes a long way.
Yeah, just minus the ego, though. No, because ego just doesn't get you anywhere.
Nowhere.
Coaches don't want to deal with an ego. They want to deal with
I was
someone.
quiet.
They want to deal with someone who believes in themselves. They don't want to deal with someone who's got an ego.
100%. You talk to anyone that played against me, they'll tell you, "No, Pauly didn't trash talk or anything.
Yeah.
I just
played.
played.
What's
I tried
your-
to destroy you."
Yeah, and so you should. What's your advice to the young kids coming up who don't have the mindset of Pauly Vandenbergh? Because I want to go back to the kids in prison. 50% of the youth prisons is filled with Aboriginal teenagers, and you talked about where they've come from within their house. 12 people, living on top of each other. No one owns anything. Like all these different things. The mindset to break that mold. You don't know what you don't know.
That's right. Yeah. And I think a big part of my foundations is always putting in strong leaders, Aboriginal leaders and / role models in front of these kids, right? And everyone that works in say, Jindu, or the Aboriginal Basketball Academy, but everyone that works there have finished year 12, got a university degree, got a home, right? And I feel like that's what we're trying to create, more role modeling, right? And so we always bring in different organisations, whether it's a lawyer firm that's got Aboriginal lawyers there, or and showing them that you can be lawyers, you can be doctors. There are many Aboriginal people, right? So what we're trying to do is just create that role modelling effect, but instilling the belief, brother, is the part, right? Because they're always taught growing up. Well, not taught, sorry. You're never told you can do it, right? I don't remember anyone saying, "Pauly, you can play NBL." I just thought of it one day. I said, "I want to play NBL." I used to joke, like, this is no lies. My cousins still pay me out about it, right? When I was about 14, 15, we would watch the NBL and Andrew Gaze was on fire then, right? And I used to take the piss sitting in the lounge room and I'd say, I could guard him. I used to say that all the time. I could guard him. And my cousins used to go, no way, like pay me out all the time. And I hit the court one day and I remember thinking about that moment.
Yeah.
I used to say it all the time. My cousins bring it up all the time. Now, that's not an ego thing, arrogance thing. It was just this confidence.
Belief.
I just had this belief, like, and I couldn't. Yeah. He scored a shitload of points on me, right? But I wasn't to know at that moment as a 14, 15-year-old.
No, but it got you there.
7 years later, I was guarding him.
Shoot for the stars, and if you fall short, you hit the moon?
Something like that. Or was it the other way? Shoot for the moon.
And you land,
and you land on the stars.
You land amongst the stars, yeah.
Something like that.
I'm a big science fiction geek. The moon and landing amongst the stars doesn't work. The stars are a bit further away.
I like that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm conscious of your time. Do you know, I haven't even gone through any of the questions I had written down. I think we've just gone off on a tangent, but I think it's been an amazing conversation. I guess for me, I want to round off before we get into some reflections. Is how do we continue making this change? How do we get the flywheel spinning? How do we build momentum with what you're doing? Because it's needed, right? And again, even just from the point of view of Australia recognising and feeling inspired by its history. Yes, there are moments where we've had to hold up the mirror and that's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you got to own that. It's happened. It is what it is. Like,
just be uncomfortable. Be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Like there are topics that we talk about in our cultural awareness that makes people feel uncomfortable, right? And that's a good thing, right? That's not if you're comfortable on the way Aboriginal people were treated, then there's something wrong.
With the rabbit-proof fence.
Rabbit-proof fence. If you watch that scene and don't reflect on your own kids, then there's something wrong, right?
No matter how many times I watch that, you can feel the emotion well up.
Yeah, and then, the power in that scene is when he says, cut.
And everyone's crying.
That's real. That's you don't just cry on the spot like that. That every Aboriginal actor and support worker there is crying because it's real. And that's what our parents taught us. That's what our grandparents passed down to us, right? The treatment part,
I reckon every room I've been in, I've done the awareness training twice where you've played that, and the room was full of tears as well.
Yeah, and that's the empathy part, brother. And unfortunately, our grandparents particularly were silenced. And so the grandkids are picking up that and trying to carry this legacy piece about you didn't fight for nothing. You didn't stay silent for nothing. What you did is, and I talk about my grandfather all the time, my mother's father. My grandfather, who was stolen, goes on to become the first Aboriginal person in South Australia to be a Justice of the Peace. Sits on the Murat Bay, which is what Sejuna used to be called, Murat Bay Council, first council member ever. He holds the seat of Thevenard, right? So non-Aboriginal people were voting for him, right? Becomes totally immersed in this new world, right? And the flow-on effect of that is my mother, born out at Kinniba, born in a mission. You tell me if you were born in an institution, you'd be okay, but born in a mission, goes to school, first 19 years of her life, she's not part of the population or be seen as a person, but gets through school, becomes a nurse, a registered nurse. We move around remote communities from the APY lands to Warburton, which is why I was born in Kalgoorlie, because she was living up in Warburton at the time and then moved to Kalgoorlie to have me, then back to Sejuna. Has a 35-year public service career. 2 years ago, she was South Australian Senior of the Year, not Indigenous. She was the South Australian Senior of the Year 2 years ago. Goes to the UN, goes to Geneva, goes to New York, representing the rights of Indigenous people, right? So amazing. So the flow-on effect there, right? Grandfather, mother. That's me now. Finish year 12, double degree, businesses, 2 homes, right? So it's flowing on now, right? This is first generation wealth though for me. Hopefully my kids start to benefit now, right? But now it starts for us, right? But not all families and communities have that luxury of having a grandfather and a mother that's able to do those sorts of things and push me along at the same time, right? Not all of us have had that luxury, right? And it's absolutely the only reason why I'm sitting in front of you, brother, is because of the decision that my grandfather made. 100%. That's the only reason that I'm sitting here today with you.
I could say it's absolutely inspiring, and I think you're 100% correct. I think I'm here the same reason. Like my grandfather picked up and decided to move to Australia and bring the family over, and we are a result of what's happened in the past, and that we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, big part of it.
And you happen to be in a world where success has followed you. Well, I've said that wrong. You've earned success. In the sense you've been able to break the mold, and understanding that not every Indigenous Australian has that grandfather who made that decision.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, all different, but I do like that breaking the mold. We talk about being the first often in the foundation. Be the first in your family to do something significant, whether it's finishing year 12 or university, whatever that looks like. Yeah. But be the first.
And it's one step at a time, right? You can look 5 years in advance, you go, oh my God, that's scary. I don't know where I'm going. It's overwhelming. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
All these different things. I think the best lesson that I was taught is just one step at a time. Like just worry about the next step.
I wanted to be a physiotherapist.
Did you?
What did you want to be?
A fireman. I just thought being in the sport world, you had no other choice but being a fireman.
I don't know why I wanted to be a physiotherapist. It's crazy.
Well, you like... It feels to me as if you like healing things.
Yeah, maybe.
Right. I'm just going to ask you a couple of reflection questions before we jump into some quick fire questions. If you could share one piece of advice for Indigenous entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah.
People who are wanting to start business. We were talking earlier about Aboriginal businesses and how we need to build more of those to keep creating that awareness.
Yeah.
What's your advice?
It's probably the one consistent message I've always had in my experience is patience. Relationships are really important, and be prepared for failure.
Yep.
Yeah. I've had plenty of failed businesses, brother. Like I look okay now, but I've had some big failures.
Yep. How many?
3.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's what builds the calluses, though, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah, it's probably what frustrates my wife the most. You failed. Let's move on. No, I mean, let's stop. No, we move on.
Yeah.
We keep pushing.
Yeah. Next, and I think that's the purpose. That's the beauty of your purpose and your why. Is that the failure is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's that didn't work. Let's find another way.
Yeah.
And when you've got a why to work to, there was a Nietzsche quote, which I'm going to absolutely butcher this, but it was essentially, you have the will to live and experience if you have a why to live for.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it works. There's purpose will keep you giving you the energy to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Which is why you keep getting up in the morning. If you had to encapsulate your entire journey in one single message or lesson, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think I've been pretty resilient. The resilience part, and maybe that word gets used a bit too much, but man, I've jumped some hurdles and jumped through some hoops to get to where I am today, and that, I could have easily given up, man. And you contemplate that often when you got failure. And even my NBL career, right, it only lasted 2 seasons. I could have easily thought that as a failure, right?
How many people don't make NBL?
That's right. Yeah. So, the resilience piece, I don't know if there's a statement, but it's more about words. The commitment that I've had and the resilience that I've had, I think that's been a big part of why I'm doing okay today.
How do you keep getting back up?
That's that crazy mind of mine, brother. Yeah, that's just how I'm wired. I don't know. I feel like I have a responsibility.
And it comes back to the purpose piece. You're so focused and determined to achieve this third space, right? Yeah. This education of Australia. But by gosh, it's a big
ask.
It's a big ask.
Yeah, I think that's Emma often talks to me. My wife often talks to me about, you don't have to do that, But something within me, bro, is telling me I have to do that, And I don't know if that's my grandfather in the background or in my mind, sometimes just saying you need to do this, it's important, or it's, as I said before, I do sometimes feel like it is my responsibility.
Yeah. It seems, though, that you're having fun doing it.
Love it, brother.
Yeah.
Love it. It's not hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's not hard.
It's just relentless, isn't it?
Yeah. Just there's no off.
Yeah. But I think that's what's so endearing about you, is that it feels like you're having fun while you do it.
Yeah. No, I love it.
Which
Honestly,
is exciting.
I love it. That's why you make a wine company too, right?
Yeah, I know.
Enjoy a glass of wine.
Well, you're paying other ways.
Yeah.
You're paying the late nights and the mind not switching off, don't you? Really?
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm going to jump into some quick fire questions
okay.
to round off the podcast.
Let's do this.
We're big readers here. We're big learners.
Yep.
Whether you've read books or gifted them, or there's some YouTube clips or whatnot. What's something that you've recommended more often than not as a way of a book or an education piece?
Definitely through my cultural awareness, I've recommended probably the most is a book called Dark Emu.
Dark Emu.
By Bruce Pascoe. Yeah. It just reshapes the perspective on Australian history and talks about Australia actually wasn't terra nullius, like the land didn't, that was how the British were able to take over Australia through this concept of terra nullius, which meant the land belonged to no one. Because apparently they didn't see any infrastructure and all that sort of stuff, and farming and all that sort of stuff. But that book delves a bit deeper into the navigators and the explorers that were here at the time, and going through their diaries and what they were seeing, and so it just brings that all together.
Wow!
It's an incredible book. Yeah, and there's actually a children's version of it as well.
Is there?
Yeah, it's really, really.
So cool. Dark Emu by who?
Bruce Pascoe.
Bruce Pascoe.
Yeah.
What's one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
Patience, man. Patience, man. Progress takes time, brother. And you got to be extremely patient. With people, with business, with sports, everything. And I think you could probably appreciate this next generation under us are not patient.
No.
They want it tomorrow.
Yeah, 3-second TikTok videos. The saying's there, right? Good things come to those who wait. What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
Man, give before you take.
Give before you take. Yeah.
I live by that.
Yeah.
I always give before I take.
I've interviewed on this podcast a guy by the name of Bob Berg. He's an author. Wrote a book, international best-selling book called The Go-Giver, and his whole premise is it's the act of giving which actually will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah.
The more you give, the more the way the universe will conspire. And
100%. Yeah, like that's a big part of our culture.
Yeah.
You know, giving. Give.
What failure or apparent failure has set you up for later success? Like, do you have a favourite failure or anything?
Yeah. For a long time, I felt like a failure in the NBL.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a long period there where I felt I failed.
But just like 2 seasons, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. So I actually thought I was going to have a 10-year career. You know, I felt like during my rookie year, I started to really get some runs on the board and started becoming more comfortable in the NBL. So I just felt like I needed one more season to really solidify my space, my spot. So I felt like I had a real failure for a long time. It actually played on me for a very long time about not staying in the NBL, which is why I then went off to sort of different tournaments I went to a tournament in Taiwan and China and, used to travel to the States a lot because I was still, I was still trying to get that back. That feeling of playing professional basketball was my driver, so.
What's your dream as a kid too, isn't it?
It was my dream, brother. It was my dream because I only saw Indigenous athletes playing AFL. I wanted to see Indigenous athletes in another sport.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
Silver lining though.
Yeah.
You're out there now achieving some amazing. What's the skill or talent that you wish you had but you don't?
This might give it away. My wife has bought me 2 guitars.
So you wish you could be a muso?
Well, not a muso. I wish I could just play the guitar.
Play the guitar.
Yeah. I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
But I got no commitment to it, brother.
I'm the same. I would love to. The idea of creating music.
Yeah. Or just, I don't care, singing old songs.
Yeah, I'm not singing.
Yeah.
I've
got a terrible voice as well.
I wouldn't put anyone
But
under
get
that
the
duress.
crowd singing.
Yeah, that's right.
There's something about a guitarist that can hold a room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some really gifted cousins that can't read music, all off sound and hearing, and they're just the best to have at a barbie.
How come you've never tried to push it?
Well, I've taken a few lessons here, and
Can you play like anything? Like Mary Had a Little
Lamb?
Yeah,
I got Mary Had a Little Lamb. Definitely got that one down pat. But I think when I'm done, I'll pick up that skill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't sound like you've got much more time for co-curricular activities. If you could swap lives with anyone for one day, who would it be?
You know what? It'd be a toss-up between Barack Obama and LeBron James. Yeah. I think Barack from a diplomacy point of view and what life might be like for him, someone like him.
Yep.
And I think LeBron just because of the power that LeBron has, and he's just a super impressive athlete.
Oh.
Right? Like, when you think about building a school.
Yeah.
Man, that was a dream of mine.
Yeah.
To build a school for Indigenous and non-Indigenous kids to go to school together. 50-50 split. You would change some real mindsets then if you had a school that did that. But yeah,
and the ripple effect on
the ripple effect, brother, 100%, right? And so, to be able to build a school, do what he does on the court, off the court is super impressive.
Keeping his body.
How are you playing at 40, bro?
Mate, I went for a run the other morning. Look at that. This is. I went for a run the other morning on my treadmill. Just a measly 5K.
Yeah.
And went to pack the treadmill away. So the treadmills, they've got like this really easy hydraulic system where you lift it up and it's light and it kind of lifts itself up for you. Yeah, that's how light it was. I put my back out. I couldn't walk for 2 weeks. I was in pain. You ask Gabs. I came in. I was like, I couldn't move. And this guy's rocking up playing 88 games a season and he's unbelievable.
He's unbelievable.
I'm the same age as LeBron.
Wow.
So that's the...
Damn.
Yeah, that's why I
would never have guessed it.
I compare myself. So, yeah, I look older, don't I?
Actually,
everyone's giving me shit. We had Paula in our team turn 40 yesterday, and everyone's going, and I was giving her shit about turning 40 because I turn 40 next year.
Yeah.
And she was saying, yeah, but you look 10 years older than us.
Oh, wow.
If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere in the world with anything written on it, what would it say and why?
Respect the land, respect the people. All starts there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. If you were to start a podcast, which you've got one, what would it be about? What is it about?
Yeah, it was always trying to amplify our voices. That was what the goal of that podcast was. But, just run out of time and all that goes with it. But, Yeah, I just loved, just like what I'm doing with you. You know,
Yeah.
I just loved it, understanding other Indigenous people's stories and how did they get there, and you know, and everyone's got sort of a similar sort of theme in terms of, you know, resilience and getting through some challenges as growing up. But yeah, it was always about elevating our voices.
Well, if you ever want to do something together, let me know. If there's any skill I can add, it's trying to get voices out there and start a podcast. Maybe we'll do a podcast together.
There we go. I like it.
If you could be famous for one thing, what would it be?
Famous for one thing.
It'd be basketball, surely.
Yeah, right. That, if I could shoot a little bit better, I might have had a longer career.
All you had was rebounds?
Mine was like, you know, I did a little bit mixture of everything.
Yeah.
So I never had a big scoring average,
Yeah.
but it was like, you know, 14 points, 12 rebounds, 8 assists type thing. So I loved that.
As long as you weren't bricking, though, were you?
No, it wasn't that bad. But yeah, you know, the one skill that will keep you in the game if you can shoot.
Yeah. So basketball would be your thing?
Probably growing up, that was probably it. I wanted to be famous for basketball, yeah. Probably now is, to be the change here in Australia.
Being the voice of change. You'll get there. What's the first thing you would do if you become invisible? It's a bit of a creepy question, but
I was thinking about this one a little bit. You know what? It comes back to my culture.
Yeah.
Seeing how they created rock art, or being a part of maybe the first corroboree, and seeing what the old ways
that actually
used to look like, you know.
That's the time travel to any event in history, isn't it? I was going to ask you that next.
Yeah, it was just... the invisible piece was actually... Sorry, the visible piece was being in the room with world leaders.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if I was invisible, just to sit there and just to hear what those conversations would be very intriguing.
But the
time travel...
Going
back, just seeing how the old people used to do things, you know, whether it was rock art.
Yeah, I was thinking about from the people that came over, the cooks of the world that came over and saw no infrastructure. It'd be interesting to see how they managed the land, because I've seen your map, the map that you show in the cultural awareness sessions. Well, it's not your map, the map of all the different, what would you call it?
Language groups.
Groups.
Yeah.
Seeing how that all came together, like that's infrastructure in its own right, isn't it? Really?
Right. Yeah. Like we use mountains and rivers and streams to create our own fences or borders. Yeah. And we moved a lot, you know, and there's evidence of, you know, some permanent dwellings, but mostly we were temporary because we moved with seasons and food source and water sources. So yeah, it's really intricate.
It was a system.
Just not the system that the Europeans were doing. That's all.
If you could have one superhero power, which would it be?
Manipulating time.
Oh, so you got more of it.
Well, to spend more time with things that truly matter.
Yeah.
Which is family, you know.
Yeah.
And I wish I had more time to spend on my own culture. That's probably the one challenge I have with being so busy in the Western world. I often reflect that I wish I had more time to be able to spend on my own identity and culture and language, especially, you know, picking up my Wirangu language or Google the language and being able to speak it fluently would be something that plays on me a lot. Manipulation
of time. All right. The best question of the podcast. What's your dad?
I've got. Of course, I've got to have an Aboriginal sort of theme to it, right? So, what do you call a boomerang that doesn't come back?
I know this one, but you can say it.
A stick.
A stick.
I tell you, if my 15-year-old hears that one, she's just going to shake her head.
I can already see it. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Pauly.
No, I hope it made sense, brother.
It did.
Thank you.
It's an amazing journey that you've been on, and you will continue to be on. I think I marvel at the fact that you continue to show up every day, just really passionate about your cause. And you know what? The part of me that I keep thinking about is it's a shame that this is your cause.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Like, it's so silly that this is actually something that you're dedicating your life to. This should... I know we shouldn't use the word should, but this should just be something that Australia recognises.
Yeah, 100%.
So, but I guess I speak on anyone that's actually listening to this and endured the hour and a half conversation. If there's anything we can do, we want to be part of it. How can we help you achieve the mission? What can we do to help you achieve the mission? Where can we connect? Who can we follow? What can we share?
Yeah. Oh, all that, brother. And, I've got a resource pack that talks about things to watch and listen to, but also equally, what can I do for you guys? You know, that's the give before you take stuff too,
absolutely.
Right? So I love being in this space and appreciate these sorts of platforms and opportunities, because, slowly but surely we're starting to make some change.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time today, mate, and we'll catch you everyone. We'll catch you next time.
Beautiful. Thank you, bro.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you and find out more about us at synergyiq.com.au. I am going to ask, though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate, and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.